And now I have the privilege of introducing our special guest, Ian Somerhalder. He flew in this morning from Atlanta, where he's filming the Vampire Diaries. And if you don't know Ian, I'll tell you that if you have any teenage daughters, they know Ian. He was a star of the hit show Lost. He is now the star of the Vampire Diaries. The reason that we have asked him to come here is because he has a 340,000 person following on Twitter. And to his credit, he uses it to mobilize young people to do things for the environment. He has the ear of young people, and he has done quite a lot of it to draw attention to environmental problems. He started his own environmental firm, and we're just delighted to have him. He's going to speak here with Manuel Roy Franzia, who Ian is from Louisiana and has spent time down there since the Gulf spill. Manuel Roy Franzia, one of the most celebrated feature writers that the Washington Post has done an enormous amount of work in Louisiana. He was down for Hurricane Katrina and has done many environmental stories in Louisiana. So we have two raging Cajuns here, and we're going to be delighted to listen to what you have to say. Thank you.
But I just want to know, it's like 342,000.
342,000, how funny. Actually, I can't let this go. You know, we had the number two at Interior, the guy that's in charge of our nation's parks and offshore drilling. We've had some of the brightest minds in energy. But I can say, I think with some certainty, that nobody was declared the 2010 sexiest beast by Entertainment Weekly. There was a poll of 1.5 million people, and Ian beat out Robert Pattinson. So, Sexy Beast 2010, not everyone has it at their energy conferences, I want you to know.
That's funny.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is so cool. Thank you.
I'm just glad that Mary made it clear that you were the sexy beast and not me. I finished second in that competition. You know, as I was listening to the earlier panels and watching a little bit of it on the internet, it occurred to me that there are a lot of really smart people in this room.
Unfortunately for me.
Yes, they'll be all over you. But there is this one subject matter that is so complex, so baffling, so utterly unfathomable that it's above all of your heads. And I'm talking about those teenagers.
Those teenagers.
And it seems like you have a special connection with them through your Twitter feed. And I was interested in getting a sense, the pulse of that community vis-a-vis this environmental question that is on everybody's minds now, particularly after the spill.
Yeah, in the wake of the spill. I mean, it is a strange thing. I'm sure you guys are wondering exactly what I'm doing here. But by virtue of the use of social media and social networking, I think that it's come a time, there's been a paradigm shift in which it started to happen, in which we are able to transfer a thought, an information, whether it's a link to an article in the Washington Post, or whether it's something some pop culture icon kid has done. Now, having said that, that information exchange happens in such an expedient manner that it's frightening. And what I learned from this whole Twitterverse, by the way, I will say this, I was so opposed to this. I was so opposed to it because I would just wanted to focus on my work, but it was hard to not recognize. I can send a message, a thought, a picture, anything, and within the first hour, about 1 million people will see it. And it grows exponentially as the hours of the day go on. That is a lot of power. Now, these kids have started to become very aware of what's going on in the political landscape of the world in this post-BP oil spill. I think that they became so involved and so enraged and started to think about what was really going on. So I guess what I'm doing here is to say that if there was a way, we have all of these policies, policy changes, environmental issues that we're dealing with. But unfortunately, the way election cycles work, politicians don't actually generally have the time, not necessarily the foresight, but still have the time to project into the future 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So if you look at a 13, say 14-year-old young boy or girl that's in school, what they don't realize is that in 4 years, they're going to have the ability to vote. They're going to be a voice, and not just a silent voice. They're going to have a real voice. So empowering them to educate themselves and to actually learn what's going on, how the heck do you do that? How do you make, I mean, to us it's cool, but how do you make an article this long in the Washington Post cool to a 14-year-old? Well,
if you have that formula figured out, our editors would like to meet with you after, after this session.
Well, I mean, in a strange sense, I sort of figured it out. And because we've looked at what you could basically see the percentage of, if I send a link out, you can tell you can see the percentage of followers who are actually going to the link. It's staggeringly high. So it means, what it tells us is that these kids are actively seeing these links, reading the articles, digressing the information, and then talking to each other about it. They're actually going out of their way in classrooms or hallways in schools. They're meeting at Starbucks. One small group raised $16,000 for the National Wildlife Federation because they asked me what was a great animal charity to donate to. I mean, like that, in a matter of days. I mean, these are 15-year-olds that raised 16 grand. And so I realized, okay, wow, this is powerful. The youth of this country are listening, they're aware, they're educating themselves, and they are essentially the ones that are going to be either reaping the benefits or navigating the really horrible landscape that we're all leaving for them. So how do we empower them? How do we make these changes? I think that it's something we should all really ask ourselves and figure out how to do that, because a 16-year-old who's a sophomore in high school now, in 2 years, will be able to vote in a presidential election. And if that 16-year-old that then becomes the 18-year-old is actually up to speed and up to date and educated and inspired by what's going on, then I think you have the ability for real change, for change that's, seated in, if you watch how information spreads amongst young people, it's like a wildfire. So an 18-year-old who just voted is telling a 17-year-old, oh man, you've got to wait till you get to do this. This is so cool. That is a really powerful thing that just stumbled upon. And I would love if we could figure out a way to use that to help address some of these issues that we're running into. I know the old adage of it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. I'm only 31, and I am so stuck in my ways. But these kids are not malleable in the sense of exploiting them, but they're open, and they know that they have their own voice. And I think that through social networking, there has to be a way, whether it's private, whether it comes from, I hate the word, but celebrities, government. How do we go into schools? How do you get into, how do you make this cool? So I have a lot of ideas, and I'm open to talk about them. But I just wanted you guys to know that the youth of this country, they have a pulse of what's going on. And I think if we can understand how to talk to them and make it cool, using the conduits like myself and others. So.
Now, you're from Mandeville, Louisiana, which, for those of you who may not be familiar with the New Orleans area, there's this big lake, Lake Pontchartrain, that's to the north of New Orleans, and there's this 24-mile bridge. At one time, it was the longest bridge in the world. And Mandeville is this little postcard town up on that north shore. It's the kind of place where there's Creole cottages and antebellum mansions, and there's this real connection with the water there. But in that whole region, the oil and gas industry is intertwined in many lives. In the same way that here in Washington we have a government company town. In Louisiana, there are people who have, you know, parents, brothers, sisters, cousins
It's
involved
intertwined
in that
into the
industry.
culture.
And I'm just wondering if, you know, because your family still lives down there, if you can tell us a little bit about that interaction, and is there a tension at all that exists between this desire for, you know, a clean environment and this sort of communal rage about what occurred?
I think there's a mass amount of confusion and anger and fear. And, you know, you have to realize that in a 78-mile stretch of the Mississippi River, I guess from a little north of Baton Rouge down, there are 150 petrochemical plants within that 78-mile stretch of river. It's a major cancer alley, as they call it. But when you go down to places like Venice, Louisiana, Grand Isle, all these places that were the hardest hit, like the epicenter of where this oil was coming in, you find that the oil and gas industry is so intertwined. It supports the life around it in abundance. So right now, these people are so freaked out because they've lost, all the fishermen have lost their massive amounts of their livelihood. Now, thankfully, I think BP, it's going to end up being okay, I think, and monetarily, they're going to all make out okay. The ecological impact, we won't know for a while. However, thankfully, it was sweet crude. It was, I mean, it was viscous. I mean, I was there 7 days after. There were these little lily pads of this really highly viscous oil. It took me 2 days getting it out of my skin. But luckily and environmentally, we hate it. They use these dispersants, and you know what the reality of it is? Talking to everyone down there is dangerous, and little that we know about them. Had that not happened, it would have been Armageddon. These marshes would be dead. And as much as we did not like to use that, it ended up working for the most part. The people down there need support. I mean, they've lost everything. How do we never, ever let that happen again? How do we never, ever let an oil well in 5,000 feet of water in the Gulf of Mexico, which I want to say, don't quote me on it, produces, you would probably know, 1/8 or something of the oxygen in the entire world. I mean, it produces a large amount of the oxygen in the world. How do we canvass that with crude oil and not be able to stop it within 100 days? That's what everyone down there is asking. How could our government, it all goes back to the government. You know, BP, they did what they did, but at the end of the day, and